Julius Randle's time in New York has been nothing short of an emotional roller coaster. Let's start from the beginning. Year 1 consisted of poor shooting, careless turnovers, that infamous reckless spin move, lackadaisical defense, and a consistent misutilization of his skill set. Randle clearly wasn't ready for a lead perimeter shot creation role. The poor surrounding talent on the roster, the terrible spacing, and having Dave Fizdale as the head coach for the first chunk of the season definitely didn't help. And the Knicks sputtered to a 21-45 record as they missed the playoffs for the 7th straight time. By the end of that season, the vast majority of Knicks fans were out on Randle and already firing up the trade machine. The organization clearly didn't view him as part of the long-term future either, as they drafted his potential replacement in Obi Toppin at number 8 overall. That 2019-2020 season was the year of the bubble. Teams who weren't invited, including the Knicks of course, didn't play from that infamous night in March when the season stopped, all the way to the start of the next season in late December. Nobody benefited more from that 9-month layoff than Randle, who oversaw one of the most impressive single-season turnarounds I've ever seen. Julius came into the season in tremendous shape while becoming a massively better shooter, playmaker, and defender. He looked like a totally different player as he led the Knicks to the 4th seed, their first playoff appearance in nearly a decade, and in just a few months' time, he was receiving MVP chants from the same fans that had grown tired of him. Julius was deservingly rewarded with an All-NBA selection and Most Improved Player. Things fell apart in the first round against the Atlanta Hawks as Randle fell to just 18 points per game on 42.52 shooting percentage. Now, it certainly wasn't all his fault. The Hawks consistently overloaded one side of the floor, forcing Randle into tough jumpers and taking advantage of the limited shot creation around him. New York's offense was far too reliant on his tough shot making, and they failed to generate any quality looks for him. Randle also struggled mightily with his decision making as the Hawks' defense game planned around him. His process was far too slow, and he was clearly overthinking the game. That overthinking trickled into the next season, as Year 3 saw Julius' jumper fall off a cliff, along with his defense and body language. The Knicks missed the play-in entirely that year, a massive disappointment considering the step they'd taken the year before. Julius saw a 4-point per game dip, shot 10% worse from 3, and sputtered to a nasty 50.92 shooting percentage. Honestly, that numbers drop doesn't even capture the ugliness of the season, as Randle's play style was often a destructive force to the Knicks on both ends of the floor. Understandably, Knicks fans wanted him gone again at this point. That offseason, Julius stepped away from the game a bit, cleared his mind, and then came back better than ever. His bounce-back season last year was partly due to the addition of Jalen Brunson, but also thanks to a reorientation of his game. Less tough mid-range jumpers, and a heavy emphasis on a more analytically driven shot profile as he regained his All-NBA form. Julius jacked 8.3 threes a night, nearly 3 more three-point attempts than any other season of his career. Playoffs were again a struggle though. Julius fell to 16.6 points per game on 48.52 shooting percentage. However, we have to factor in the ankle injury he suffered. After initially spraining it with 5 games to go in the regular season, he re-injured it in Game 5 versus Cleveland just as he seemed to be figuring things out. That same injury he played through in the playoffs required surgery this past offseason. It looked like we were headed for another bout of even-year Randle this year, as he struggled immensely through the first 6 games of the season. He put up just 13 points a game on 37.92 shooting. Thankfully, that seemed to just be a slow start, perhaps rust from that off-season surgery. Since those first 6 games, Julius is back at 25 points a game on 59.42 shooting. Now, it's not all perfect, as his defensive buy-in leaves plenty to be desired, and his decision-making can still be a bit chaotic at times. Randle's definitely back at a star level. That ankle surgery may have been somewhat of a blessing in disguise, as it gave Julius time to focus on film more in depth than he ever had, as he told Fred Katz in an article for The Athletic recently. Throughout Randle's tenure in New York, his fatal flaw has been the tendency to make his game too hard for himself. Pump faking out of open threes in favor of contested pull-ups. He'll catch and hold the ball, sacrificing an advantage a teammate had created for him. He'll operate 20 feet from the basket, having to work extra hard to get inside. There's still some of that stuff, but Randle's doing the simple things more. He battles for deeper post positioning so he can attack mismatches in the paint instead of having to work his way from just inside the arc. He's moving without the ball more so he can catch it on the move instead of having to create everything from standstill. The way he attacks closeouts are more decisive. He gets rid of the ball quicker versus double teams. The mid-rangers he does take are shorter ones in the middle of the paint, not long contested twos. And one wrinkle the Knicks have run for him is featuring more 4 or 5 pick and rolls, with Randle running it with either Mitch or Hartenstein to draw opposing bigs out of the paint and into space. Instead of having to meet those bigs right at the rim, Julius can attack them downhill with a bit of a runway. An observation I've had is that there's a few instances of players who came in as slashers or primarily play finishers around the basket, developing their jumper significantly, but then they fall a bit too in love with that newly successful jumper. In the process, they de-emphasize their biggest strength, which was originally getting to the basket. There's a little bit of that in guys like Anthony Davis, Bam Adebayo, Brandon Ingram, De'Aaron Fox, and definitely Randle. The tough shot making Randle has added to his arsenal was huge for a Knicks team that was very limited on creation upon his arrival. While he is a talented shooter, Randle was never destined to be a full-time, mellow type shot maker. The mid-range turnarounds, the fadeaways, and the stepbacks are still in his bag, but now it's just part of the mix, not the main part of his diet. When Randle does the easy work and makes 0.5 decisions, either shooting, attacking, or passing immediately, the process is much better for him. While he'll never be the fastest processor of the game, playing without hesitation totally changes the game for him. Getting him downhill more frequently via cuts, rolls, or handoffs is definitely something the coaching staff can scheme up more of, but it also is on Randle to consistently play more decisively when he does get those opportunities. I think the peak, most sustainable version of Randle is one that combines his skill level with his bully ball core from his earlier days. Trending this direction should make him a less erratic playoff performer, something the Knicks desperately need. A maddening tendency Julius has, and a big reason why he's drawn the ire of fans at times, is when he lets his shot not falling crater the rest of his game. Far too often, his energy level is directly tied to his scoring performance. This is especially frustrating because Julius is capable of affecting the game in so many ways outside of scoring. He can body guys on the glass for rebounds. He can slide with ball handlers and isolation defense to force tough shots. He can affect shots at the rim with his size when he's willing to rotate on time and with purpose. He can dominate in paint either as a scorer or by capitalizing on the attention he draws by spraying it to open teammates. He can make quick decisions with the ball. At the peak of his powers, there's really not much he can't do. It's hard to stop a 6'9" guy with his strength, quickness, handle, shot making, and passing ability when he's really locked in. That version of Randle where everything is clicking and he's consistently making those quick decisions is a total mismatched nightmare and well-deserved of his All-NBA selections. That's why it's so frustrating for Knicks fans to see the other side of him. The defensive lapses, mixed box outs, moments of lazily bringing the ball up the floor, making zero contact on screens, and just overall poor body language. When you see that mopey version of Randle, it can be a destructive force. That version is one capable of torpedoing Knicks defense with a lack of effort, while hijacking the offense with both poor and ultra-slow decision-making. Now, nobody should question Julius' work ethic. The man clearly puts in a tremendous deal of work into both his body and into continuously improving his game. You don't get to where he's come without an immense amount of work. I have no doubt that he wants to win. But the inconsistency of his effort levels when things aren't going well for him is what makes him so volatile within the Knicks fan base. They can live with an inconsistent jumper, but the lackadaisical play doesn't fly. At the end of the day, Knicks fans will support anyone who plays hard and plays smart. This is a group of fans that stand Frank Ntilikina. With that said, Julius should be commended for the way he's progressed, especially in light of immense criticism from the media and the fan base. Don't get me wrong, frustrations with him have often been valid, but taking it in and responding the way he has is not something everyone is built for. Knicks fans should be very grateful for what he's done for the organization. Now, the ultimate question with Julius is where he stands on a championship level team. At the moment, his unreliability makes it difficult to fully trust him as a premier option in the playoffs, where it's hard to have someone with his volatility soak up the usage he does. Based on their time so far, it's fair to question whether both Randle and coach Tom Thibodeau are floor raisers rather than ceiling raisers. They absolutely helped bring stability to the Knicks at a time they desperately needed it, but a poor playoff run this year would lead to an offseason of questioning whether they have what it takes to get the franchise to the final steps. If Randle were to falter again, the conversation would then pan to whether his play style could be fit for a third option role if the Knicks were to add another star. I think he's capable of fulfilling that role, but it's something he'd have to buy into. I'm not ready to write Julius off from producing at an All-NBA level in April, May, and June yet though. He hasn't played a large sample of playoff games yet, and the ones he has under his belt is a tricky sample to evaluate. This will be a massive year for him, although unfortunately he's again hampered by a shoulder injury. Initial indications seem to be positive, but I really hope Julius can be at 100% for the playoffs, both so the Knicks can get a full chance to make a run, but also so we can truly evaluate Randle. Assuming Randle's good to go, I think this version of him is the most sustainable yet. Being a decisive, downhill bully that sprinkles in jumpers instead of living on them is a play style that he can successfully translate to the playoffs. It's on him to prove it, but I'm confident in a better performance this time around.